Hello everybody, how are you? Guys, this video is Omaha, the 1800s. That's what we're going to talk about in this video. And the 1800s, I would call them the teenage years for Omaha. Now, if you're new to the channel, we talk about all kinds of different things here, but this is a part of a continuing series of spotlights on different communities, and this week we're talking about Omaha. And the 1800s were a time of boom and bust in Omaha because the economy would go up and it would go down. Now, that was very typical of a lot of towns in the growing country of the United States of America. But nonetheless, Omaha was a very good laboratory example of that because it would just boom. They would just be rolling in it. I mean, people would be buying, as they do at all times in history, buying stuff they didn't need, buying fancy hats, buying fancy shoes, buying horses they don't need. Honey, can we get an extra horse? We can't afford another horse. Yeah, we can. We're in a boom. We're in a boom time here in Omaha, honey. What do we need another horse for? Well, if I had my own horse, you could take one horse to work and I could take the kids to school in the other horse, and then I'd have it available during the day to go shopping. This is not a two-horse family. You know, these are the kind of arguments that they would have during the boom times. And then during the course the other way, in the bust times, they're saying, yeah, Junior, what are you doing? What are you putting on your oatmeal there? It's a pat of butter, Dad. Junior, we're in a bust time, son. We don't afford butter. You cannot be slicing butter and putting it on your oatmeal. All right. And then the father looks over a minute later. Junior, what are you doing? I'm putting some sugar on my oatmeal. This is a bust time, boy. We don't have money for sugar. And those are the kind of arguments, you know, that they would have. So now what's interesting is that some weird things happened during this time. Like in 1865, a steamboat sank, just north of Omaha. And now you say, well, how does a steamboat sink in the Missouri River? Well, it was heading, they were supposed to be heading to the gold fields. That was the original purpose of the charter. But unfortunately, they got mixed up. They loaded it with a bunch of cattle, and they started to head the other way. They turned around and headed the other way, meaning the Missouri runs into the Mississippi spills into the Gulf of Mexico, and they took that water route and then around Florida and taken these cattle up to the Northeast, where they could sell them at a good profit. Well, you can't put a bunch of cattle on a steamboat. Do you know how much cattle weigh? And the thing sank. And it wasn't until years later that they pulled up the steamboat. They were able to recover everything on this steamboat. And even all of the cattle skeletons, which they reconstructed, and you can now see at the Steamboat Cattle Skeleton Museum just outside of Omaha. They'll even let you ride one of the skeletons and get the kids on there. But that was kind of the crazy things that were happening in the 1800s. You know, you look back in history and there's all sorts of these wild, like, what are you talking about? A cattle steamboat sank to the bottom of the Missouri. First of all, how deep is the Missouri? Pretty deep, I guess. Deep enough. All right, and then in the mid-1600s, they started the Transcontinental Railroad. They had to wait for the U.S. Congress to give them approval. So the U.S. Congress said that the Union Pacific Railroad could start to build westward. They had to get that okay from the big boys upstairs in Washington. And they started to do that. And that was a huge change That was a huge benefit to Omaha and started a long boom period in the late 1800s. And so because these are the guys that were made for the railroads. They had stockyards full of cattle. They had cattle at the wazoo, and they had a wholesaling operation that was unrivaled, other than maybe Chicago, right? So now you had the railroads, and they're like, "Hey, we're ready, baby. We got this. We got the inventory, and we're gonna send it to you." All of the great, you guys. They said to the country, Omaha said to the country, "You guys are gonna be swimming in steaks now, because we got the cattle, all right? We've got the stockyards." I know everybody talks about Chicago, but here in Omaha, guys, we got the stuff. We got the stuff, right? So that's how they talked. We got the stuff. There's a guy in my college. That's exactly how he talked. We got the stuff, man. So as a result of the the railroads going in and heading west, now Omaha is this part of a nerve center, and it's one of the big nerves. And this is exactly what my dad would say. You're getting in my last nerve. So now people heading, Omaha essentially became a gateway to the west. Now you say, well, wait, I thought St. Louis was a gateway to the west. That came later. And then, even then, Omaha was a gateway to the gateway. What are y'all doing over here? We're a gateway to the gateway. All right, so yeah, shamalama ding dong. They started building bridges, and they had a really extensive trolley system, or really horse-drawn trolleys is what it was. They called it the horse railway, and it was very extensive. And then they later replaced the horse-drawn rail cars with the trams, the cable trams, which was also pretty extensive. And then they built a bridge, the first wagon and pedestrian bridge from Council Bluffs, the Douglas Street Bridge running from between Omaha and Council Bluffs. Okay. So you're starting to see, right? It's starting to look like a city, like more of a city. See what I'm saying? Now, of course, this is still the West, and you had the wildness going on. There was gambling, there was drinking, they were playing poker. Some were playing strip poker, some were playing Monopoly for money, some were playing Trouble. You know, Trouble, where you pop that plastic thing and it does the thing. You know, there are all kinds of gambling games were going on. I mean, they were throwing hands in the middle of poker games, meaning there was fist fights over somebody cheated or didn't cheat, or drew a card or didn't draw a card, or somebody pulled it out of their hat, or, you know, bang, bang. You know, it was still really a combination of the Wild West and the beginning of a real town with railways, with trams inside the city. So now you have mass transit with a connecting bridge between Council Bluffs and, right? See what I'm saying? We're moving from the Wild West days to a more civilized, in quotes, civilized future. But now they still had all kinds of crazy things happening, like the town completely flooded in 1881. Now, did that stop the craziness that was going on, the gambling and the fistfights and the people meeting at high noon to do a draw? Draw, boy! I know. You're going to meet your maker today. You know, those kind of things like in the movies. No, the flood didn't change that at all. In fact, there's history records of people having gunfights out at high noon during the flood. You know, the water would be coming up to their chest, and he's like, draw, boy, draw. You better draw right now. And he went to get his gun, and it was so waterlogged that nobody could shoot. I mean, it was wild. But that's just how it was. I mean, you know, the thing is, when you see these old movies of the crazy Wild West, it wasn't too far off. I mean, of course, they took dramatic license, but, you know, those kind of things went on, right? But slowly, they started to get more of a civilized kind of veneer. For example, in the late 1890s, they held the Trans-Mississippi and International Exposition, which was kind of like a World's Fair, with touches of Disney World. And it was supposed to be a celebration of industrial and agricultural might of the Midwest. You know, Omaha, I think, in a way, saw themselves as sort of this real center of the Midwest, right? Or maybe not. Who knows? Wow, that was a very thorough historical insight. But no, you had this growing city, and now they have this Trans-Mississippian International Exposition. They're basically saying, hey, not only is agricultural changing and rapidly growing as well as industry, so is Omaha, baby. We're here to stay, right? It was as much of a PR thing than anything else. And of course, they had some of those early elements that you see at Disney World and at you know, state fairs and amusement parks around the globe. So they were one of the first to have the tramway over the fairgrounds. Now, the problem was the original, like a SkyTram, but the problem was that the original SkyTram went over the cattle yards, right? Went over the stockyards, the animal portion of the Trans-Mississippian International Exposition. And people were so knocked out. Now, at first they get on the SkyTram cars, and it takes them up, and they're like, "Whoa, this is fantastic, isn't it, Mama? Oh, this is great. Sally and Cindy and Mark and James, all the kids and Dad's there, Papa and Mama." And they're in the, you know, but then it goes over the cattle yards. They're like, oh, I'm dying. I'm dying from the smell. And then, of course, the sons are kidding the daughters. "Cindy, is that you? I can't. Is that you smelling over there?" And then Cindy be like, "Mama, tell him to quit kidding and teasing." Right? It was a whole family thing, but people were getting knocked out by the cattle smell, guys. And so let's just say that a lot of these innovations started in the Trans-Mississippian International Exposition, but were refined and perfected at places like Disneyland years later, and then Disney World. So that is really a snapshot look at, I would call them the teenage years of Omaha. And the next video will get into more of the modern era, meaning the 1900s and the 2000s, and will bring us up to date. And then in future videos, we'll talk to people on the street, and we'll look at some of the things that are going on currently in the city. And yeah, it'll be exciting and fun. And of course, as always, guys, I made up most of this off the top of my head. Let's call it 98.5%. And this is a parody video. If you're new to the channel, these are parody videos. We're parodying history videos, travel videos, tourism videos, and blogs and all other kinds of books and all that stuff. TV shows. So don't leave comments like, "This is BS. None of this is true." Well, of course. That's the whole idea. All right, come on back, man. Come on back.